And welcome once again to the 2024 Capital Magnet Fund question and answer session with the Capital Magnet Fund program team. Again, I'm Andrew Schlack. I'm the program manager. We have the full team on board today to help address questions that folks have. So we're thrilled with the interest. Lots of folks are dialing in and zooming in, if you will. So let's get right to it. And I'm just going to pass it over to my colleague, Joe Joy, who's got a few slides, and then Elizabeth Hoffman will go over a couple of ground rules before we get to everyone's questions. So Joe, take it away.
Thank you, Andrew. So we just have a few intro slides here. This very short deck will also be posted on the Step to Apply page as a resource either tomorrow or Friday. So here is the remaining application timeline that we just wanted to remind you of, particularly that April 12th at 5 p.m. is the last day to contact Capital Magnet Fund staff. Submitting a service request if you have questions is the fastest and it's strongly preferred. The last day to contact the AMIS IT help desk regarding AMIS technical problems only is April 16th at 5 p.m. And this is all in Eastern time. And again, submitting a service request in AMIS is the preferred method of contact. And then the final deadline for the CMF online application and all required attachments to be submitted electronically via AMIS is April 16th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. And so yeah, so just a plug there to, you do not have to wait to the last minute. So keep working hard on your applications and asking us questions. This slide here, I'm not going to read through it, but as I said on the previous one, submitting a service request is the best way to get in contact with us. Here are step-by-step instructions if you've never submitted one before. And again, we strongly prefer this as the fastest way to contact the CMF program team. And then hope you're all familiar by now with the resources that we have posted on the Step to Apply page. We encourage you to review everything listed here. Most of the time when we're asking your questions, this is our first stop. So encourage you to be very familiar with those. And we also have been posting the links to access the recording for the previous webinars, as well as the presentations on the Step to Apply page in this nice chart. And we will be reposting this presentation and this recording as well this week. And then here at the bottom, Sarah's really awesome AMIS demonstration video. There's a link to that, and it's time-stamped and super helpful. So strongly recommend using that as a resource as well. And with that, I will pass the mic over to Elizabeth to kick off our question and answer session.
Thanks, Joe. Welcome again, everyone. So our question and answer session, we are going to use the hand raise feature within Zoom. That's using the reactions button down on the bottom of your screen. If you have a question, we would like you to raise your hand. I'm going to be the MC, so I will take turn on calling on people and asking them to unmute. If you wish, you may turn on your camera while you ask your question, but you don't have to. We'll ask you to go ahead and say your full name and the organization you're calling from before asking your question. We find it's really easiest when folks do ask the question live, but if you are somewhere that you're having audio issues or on a train or somewhere that you can't ask, you can go ahead and send a chat to me, Elizabeth Hoffman. I will try to read those out for you. And if we run out of time today, you can, of course, always submit a service request with any additional questions. If there's something also that's very, very specific to your organization, we might say, let's follow up offline. We're looking for questions that, will be broadly applicable to multiple applicants. Okay, is that the last slide, Joe? Oh, yes, and also topics that we won't be covering today include anything about prior rounds, compliance questions, certification questions, or questions on other programs. So if you have those questions, please submit them by service request, but we are going to hone in on CMF today. So I believe that is the last slide. I will go ahead and invite folks to raise their hand if they have any questions using the Zoom reactions feature. And while we're waiting for the questions to queue up, I will also put in my personal plug, inviting you to not wait until the last minute to submit your application. Every year we get a couple of frantic service requests after midnight with folks who had problems with different things. If you haven't been in AMIS for a while, or perhaps your CEO, whomever your authorized representative is, hasn't been in AMIS for a while, you can encourage them to log in now, make sure they know their password, make sure there's no issues with their username. We know that you are all doing great work out in the community and would hate to have it, somebody get tripped up at the end, just sort of, for a little technical issue.
And to fill in a little time, again, we've made the team available here. We're going to also, Joe is going to have the frequently asked questions, the application instructions. This is where we're answering our questions from. So we were going to do a little show and tell here until the first question comes in. And we'll just hold on. But this time is all about you guys. So please raise your hand and ask questions. We're here for the time that you need, but I'll let Joe sort of demonstrate on the documents that we're going to be referring to today.
Thanks, Andrew. So real quickly, as the first round of questions comes in, we just wanted to visually show, give a quick tour of the step 2 apply page that we ask in your question. And if we didn't mention, if you're not raising your hand, please turn your camera off. If you're not part of the CDFI Fund team, you'll be invited to turn it on when it's your turn to ask your question. Thank you. So here we have this timeline, which I went over briefly. This table where you can access recordings for previous webinars, as well as the AMIS demo, and then all of the application materials. Our go-to ones are probably the application instructions and the FAQs. You can see I've been using them based on the fact that it saves my spot. So yeah, with that, I see we have hands, so I will turn the mic back over to our MC, Elizabeth.
Great, thanks, Joe. Laura, I saw your hand first. Will you please go ahead and unmute and tell us where you're from and ask your question?
Hi, I'm Laura Oyen, and I'm calling from Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity in Minnesota. And my question has to do with question 11A through C. The part B, we have to fill out Appendix 1. And it says the applicant will use the requested CMF award as a part of a financing strategy to address the challenges and financing gaps identified. And what I was wondering is what we list on Appendix 1, is that just what we plan to use the CMF money for? Or does it talk about all the other wraparound financing that we've also stacked and layered on it? It could be read either way, whether it's just the amount for the award and the difference in interest rates, or is it if we have some other down payment assistance that families will also use in the affordability piece, do we include amounts of money and information there for awards that are not CMF but are leveraging are being leveraged by the CMF money, if that makes sense.
I can answer that, Laura. For Appendix 1, you're going to want to describe your own products and how they tie, what you're doing in terms of financing ties into what the needs are that you identified. When you get to Appendix 3, you're going to have a chance to talk a little bit more, not in detail, but you're going to be filling out a sources and uses, and you're going to be going into some detail about other sources of funds and generally where they're coming from. So hopefully that answers your question.
It could be, if we don't specifically have a product because we're not a bank or something like that. So does that mean we're building the home and then we have other people who have the down payment assistance? So we're going to have a very small list on Appendix 1. Would that be a correct assumption then?
Yes, I can weigh in for Appendix 1. I think it's looking specifically in the AMIS screen. There's some instructions at the top, and it's the products that you would be offering with your CMF award. So we understand that you might have other products or your partners might, but Appendix 1, you can really hone in on those that you are hoping to use for CMF.
Okay, so just if we get the CMF award, that's what we're going to use this money for, that sort of analysis. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right, thank you. I'm going to ask Kathleen to go ahead and unmute, tell us where you're from, and ask your question.
Hi, this is Kathleen Cavern. I'm with Art Space Projects. We're a national nonprofit affordable housing developer based in Minneapolis. And we will be looking at proposing 5 new developments and 2 recaps for our Capital Magnet Fund. Application 1 is in a rural community. My question is on Appendix 3A, our project pipeline. So for most of these projects, we've got, a lot of our financing already in place, LIHTC awards, et cetera. So this is two questions. One is, are we held to the total project cost for those projects we put into this project pipeline? And also, one of the projects, the rural project, is in really the inquiry stage. And so we don't have a pro forma and, renderings. I mean, I'm guessing. So are those numbers something that we're going to be held to, or is it okay for us to estimate on project costs, units, et cetera?
Yeah, I can hop in and take that one. So a couple things to keep in mind. First, the specific projects that you're listing in the application are going to be exactly what you're held to in your assistance agreement. However, there are parts of the application that we use to populate your assistance agreement. These include the private leverage multiplier, which is question 14H, and then the proposed number of units that you put in Appendix 2, Table B2. So it is important that the information you're entering into the application, you feel confident that you can meet, that is realistic. But if it's perhaps not the very specific amount of eligible project costs, that's okay. I answered, a similar question this morning, and we just want to make sure that it is clear for all applicants, the information that you entered throughout the application, it needs to mirror each other in the appendices. So the information you're entering into question 14 with your leverage costs, which also then populates your private leverage multiplier, those numbers there's validations within Appendix 2 and 3. We highlight this in the AMIS demonstration video as well as the AMIS guide, but there are these validations that we've introduced in the last couple of years to ensure that there's fidelity between what you enter in question 14 and the questions and the appendices. So all that to say is give us your best estimate, but keep in mind that the private leverage multiplier in question 14H and the proposed number of units in Appendix 2, Table B2 would be a part of your assistance agreement should you be awarded. Anybody else want to add to that?
Just to underscore the importance of what Sarah's saying too, is that the projects you put in your application are meant to be exemplary projects of the type that you're going to be financing. So back to Kathleen, your original question, it doesn't have to be those 5 specific projects, but as Sarah said, the projects that you put in your pipeline will become, if you're awarded, performance goals and measures that you need to manage to. So it might not be those specific projects, but you'd be accountable for providing a, similarly scaled project if you were to be an award.
Okay, perfect. That makes a lot of sense. And I just want to say, I love that validating tool that you guys added. It's kind of like every time I went red, I just had to pull my hair out a little more until it went green. So that was good.
Great feedback. Yes. Sarah works so diligently on those validations. So
that was a good one.
Thrilled they are coming in handy, and that the description of where the specific error directs you back to the correct place to make a resolution. It's brilliant. Thanks for the feedback, Kathleen.
Excellent. All right. Mitch, would you like to go ahead and unmute, tell us where you're from, and ask your question, please?
Sure. Hi, Mitch Crispell. I'm with the Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing here in Arlington, Virginia. My question is about the reinvestment section. What scoring advantage is there to having the funds reinvested in other projects that will also finish within the 5 years? We're certain that we'll be reinvesting the money in projects that will finish later than the 5-year period, right? But I don't think we can count those there. So is there any advantage to reinvesting within, to projects that will finish in 5 years? Thank you.
That is a great question. Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I can try to answer, and then, other, team members feel free to hop in. One of the things we do communicate in the NOFA is that we prioritize private leverage, right? So reinvestment is a type of leverage. So one advantage that reinvestment can have is if you have higher amounts of private leverage, that then plays into the leverage multiplier. There isn't a priority among the different leverage types within the application, just private leverage is our priority. So there's no specific advantage to reinvestment leverage, but is there anything else my team would like to add?
Yeah, I would just say you do not need to include reinvestment leverage if it's really not part of your strategy, because I would just say that if it's not part of your strategy, don't include it. And there's no disadvantage to that. If it is, that's a good thing too, and it adds to your overall leverage.
And I would add, it really, like Paul and Sarah both saying, it depends on your strategy. So if you're struggling to reach the statutory leverage requirement, this is an important aspect of our agreement, right? But you can imagine on certain development types where there is less private capital that's attracted just because that's the economics of the project. Reinvestment leverage is a critical part, right, to meet the 10-to-1 requirement. For other development models, it might not be necessary. Like a lot of development types far exceed that. And so it's a tool, but it's not a necessary tool to be used.
Thank you. And one final point there is we definitely can't talk about any project that would finish after the 5-year term, correct? In that section or anywhere else?
When you say we can't talk about it, you would not want to put it into your unit count, for example, because you would be held for that. We do understand that CMF does generate program income and folks go on to do helpful things with that, but you would make sure to not want to put those units in your unit count.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And just to plug in to build on what Elizabeth shared and Mitch, your question, we worked really hard, right, to flag all of the data points that are going to end up as PG&Ms in the application instructions. And so one last thing before folks submit their application, I would highly encourage you to look at what those resultant values are and to just do a ground truth, before you hit submit, because once you submit, your application is locked and there's nothing that, we can do to make an adjustment. And if you find that your performance goals are either overstated or understated from your perspective, it means that some part of the data is not flowing. Usually it's going to be in the appendices from the project, the pipeline or projection tables, where there's sort of like a disconnect in the data. But I would just strongly encourage everyone to, before you hit submit, make sure that we've started even in all the application instructions just to call it out. Do a final, QC check, because those will translate if you're given an award into your assistance agreement. And we want to be sure that everyone's comfortable with what they propose, because there's not much we can do, after you submit the application and awards are made.
Excellent point. Justin, will you go ahead and unmute, tell us where you're from and ask your question, please?
Yeah, hey, thanks guys. I'm Justin Spies. I'm with Jubilee Housing here in DC. I have a question about the high opportunity areas and sort of the criteria for that. So we have properties that are steps away from like a bank, but just because of the way the lines are drawn, they're not in the same census tract. So how stringent are the defined criteria of the HOAs?
That is a great question. Are you talking about the standard HOA definition or the CMF expanded HOA definition?
I believe I'm talking about the CMF expanded.
Okay. I would have to pull up the NOFA or the right, maybe one of my teammates could do that, but I know that there is, I think there is a mile distance given, that it's not based on census tract, but it has to be within a certain mileage, I believe. But we're going to have one of my teammates will look that up to make sure we get you the correct information here.
Sure, I have that handy. So for access to financial services, to meet this criterion, you do have to be in the census tract with the bank or credit union. So that is specifically stated in the definition, so there would not be flexibility on that. But keep in mind, you do not have to meet all of these criteria, right? You need to meet at least 3 of the 4 criteria for you to meet the expanded definition. So perhaps there could be another one of the 4 that you can meet and you'd be able to count that unit. But since it's very specifically stated that it must be in the census tract, unfortunately, we cannot give flexibility on that particular criterion.
All right, then let me ask a follow-up. So another one of the criteria is that it needs to be my multimodal transportation hubs. Does that mean that a hub needs to have in itself 2 different types of transportation, or that it can be near 2 different types of public transportation? Like if there's a bus stop and a metro station within the same radius, but they're not at the same place, is that disqualified?
I'm going to defer to another member on my team on that one.
That has not come up before. I think we'd have to look at it. So you're saying they're in the same location?
The same radius, the same, quarter mile radius, but not necessarily in the same place.
Okay. We can get back to you on that.
Yeah, let's research that and get back. It depends on the way that the language was shaped. We understand the point and the nuance. And Justin, if you can put in a service request, we'd be glad to respond to it.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Great, thank you. All right, Marianne, invite you to unmute, tell us where you're from and ask your question.
If I could, just back to that last questioner, I just wanted to clarify that, the high opportunity areas, it's sort of like a waterfall. Like you start with the defined high opportunity areas. And if it doesn't pass muster, your project location with the, data set, then the second, layer you can look at is our expanded definition. So if folks are starting with the expanded definition, your easiest course, let's say easiest, right, is to just start with the data set that's out there. Most of it is included, but then we've offered this expanded definition. So it's sort of like start with the easy, the low hanging fruit is what's in the data set. And then the second tier to look at would be qualifying a project under our high opportunity area. So thought that was worth mentioning, just wanted to interject. Sorry to interrupt. Was it Marianne had the next question?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for taking my question. My video somehow doesn't work. My question has to do with the application as a section on payment options. I think it's 2B. And an applicant can either, if awarded, select a lump sum or initial and subsequent payment. Could you explain what impact that would have on an assistance agreement if an awardee had selected the split payment? Does that have any impact on the deliverables, PG&Ms and commitment dates or disbursement dates in any way?
I can take that one. So the only thing that is different when you have the subsequent payment option is you have a second commitment date. So if there's only one payment, your commitment, you only have one commitment date, and it's 2 years after your effective date. If you select the subsequent payment option, you have a second commitment date that is 3 years after the effective date of your assistance agreement for you to commit that second payment. So it gives you more time to commit to projects, but nothing else changes. You're still hold to the same project completion and disbursement timeline that you would be if you got one payment.
And so I would imagine too, then that's tied into specific projects. So if a payment was split and you finance 3 projects with that first payment, that's the trajectory of reporting for that, for those 3. And then the second one would be different.
Again,
No?
only the commitment date.
Only the commitment. Okay.
The project completion date and the disbursement, everything else stays the same. It's only, you have essentially another year if you get 2 payments to commit that second payment to projects.
Okay.
Anyone
And
else want to
Joe,
add?
Yeah, Joe and Marianne, I would suggest Joe can bring up, we have the 2023 assistance agreement. So I think folks that might be new to the Capital Magnet Fund program, I like to direct people to just like look at the assistance agreement for 2023. There is a structural issue that you're touching on, Marianne. Joe's going to navigate us to the assistance agreement right now. You'll see how this translates into your assistance agreement. Again, this is the 2023 version. There will be changes to the 2024 version, but since this is available, the concept and how this translates into specific PG&Ms will be evidenced in the agreement that Joe's going to pull up here that she's got up on the screen. So you can see, Marianne, exactly how this is going to work. And I would just say that, you know, the subsequent payment option is helpful to organizations because right now, nobody knows, you know, if you were given an award, nobody knows what the size of that award is going to be. And so as the award sizes have grown over time, we thought this was a valuable tool to add to the recipient's sort of like planning and you know, strategy to allow for subsequent payments, because it used to just be one lump sum payment. And then everyone had to live within the 2-year commitment deadline. So this basically allows you to pace out your projects a little more. But say you asked for, you know, a $10 million award, I'm just making up the numbers, and you said, oh, I would like one disbursement in the first, you know, tranche to be $6 million, and I'd like the second tranche to be $4 million. Okay, because you're going to manage your commitments that way. If you were given an award for, let's say, $8 million, what that's going to mean is that you'll get a $6 million initial tranche payment and then the second tranche payment of $2 million. It just becomes the remainder. However, let's say, you know, you wrote your application for $10 million, you requested $6 million in the initial tranche, but based on competitive basis, you were only given a $4 million award. Well, what the program team will do is we will make the adjustment and you will get a $4 million award with a $4 million initial payment. Because basically in your application, you told us you would use the $6 million on the first tranche. So that's kind of like the mechanics of how that works, but it's really set up to be in your favor to help, you know, organizations of varying size and capacity and pipeline more effectively manage the requirement of their assistance agreement.
Okay. Thank you. That helped.
Yeah. And a big plug in there too for what Joe demoed and like looking at the 2023 specimen, assistance agreement as a good proxy for what, if you're given an award, your 2024 agreement will look like. And, there isn't a lot of negotiation in that assistance agreement. It's the instrument that's used to close on your award. And it will, if you're given an award, it's kind of, if you're not comfortable with the terms and conditions in that assistance agreement, especially for folks that are newer to the Capital Magnet Fund program, we just like to be, fully transparent about the actual agreement that we'll end up using at the end of the day.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and have Isabel. You can unmute and tell us where you're from and ask your question.
Hi, thanks. Isabel Milkovich. I'm with New Hope Housing in Houston. We're applying as a affordable housing developer. And my question is about the leverage strategy. So we do have use LIHTC quite heavily. And I'm wondering if this counts toward the private leverage multiplier, because that money is coming from private equity investors, or if that's considered a public leverage because it's coming from, ultimately from the federal government through the state of Texas.
Yeah, Isabel, it is considered private investment from our point of view. You're exactly right. It is coming from private investment.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That is what I wanted to hear. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. We are going to pause for a moment and let folks have time to think about more questions that they might want to be asking. Again, for those who maybe joined a little late, we will put in a plug to help us help you by not waiting until the last minute to submit your things. If you have, make sure that your AMIS contacts are in order, that your authorized representative is active, that he or she or they know their password. There is plenty of time to help with these sorts of technical issues now. The original deadline for this, according to our formula, should have in fact been on April 15th, but we felt that it would not be kind to have tax day and the CMF application due on the same day. So we made the deadline the 16th, but just get it in by the 12th, and then you'll have all the time making the deadline to ask programmatic questions and life will be grand. Okay, we have another question that's come in. Khalid, please go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
That's perfect pronunciation, by the way. Yeah, so Khalid Hawthorne with Mikos Foundation. We are looking at, we have a pipeline of projects, and there's one that is currently under construction, but we may add some additional capital items to that on the back end. Would that still qualify, or is that out of the scope of this of the Capital Magnet Fund?
We do recognize that you may have some projects underway, and the Capital Magnet Fund might fill in some gaps that you hadn't expected, or as you're saying, you want to do some other things. You haven't gotten to permanent financing yet, so it might be part of the permanent financing. There is a look back period. So, and the team can help me out a little bit if I didn't see if I remember this correctly. But you look back 3 years from your commitment date, and it's 36 months. And then the project cannot have been complete before the announcement date. So if the project is done at the time we announce your award, all bets are off. No, you can't use CMF. But if the project has started and you begin your award process, you do have this 36-month look back. I'd encourage you to look for the specifics of this under the FAQs and under, under the assistance agreement, just to make sure that yours fits the details. It's not, it's a little complicated. So want to make sure that you look at it. And of course, we're available via service request should that come up later.
Yeah, Khalid, Joe, I've asked Joe to put up the assistance agreement, and you can see this section. It's, what is it, Joe, 3.6? What's the body of the 3.4?
Of Schedule 2.
Of Schedule 2. So
page 10 of something and 32 of.
Yeah, so I just want to be really clear. The answer to Khalid's question is not like a global, response. The short answer is it depends. Okay, and it depends on certain conditions, and all those conditions are going to be in the assistance agreement. So Khalid, if you cruise through this agreement and put the facts of your particular situation to test on this, and then you have a question, submit a service request, and the team can help you analyze it. But this is where that answer is. I guess the short answer is it depends.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, no, that's good. Been making my way through a lot of the documents, and had seen there's another one I know that we've already applied for, which I know that we can apply these dollars towards, but wasn't sure about that. The one that's already kind of under construction. Yep.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep, of course. And let us know if there's a follow-up, and we'd be happy to answer a service request.
Yes, in fact, it depends. It's one of our favorite answers here at the CMF team, but we do usually have 200 pages backed up about which way it's going to depend on. So kudos to anybody who has made it through all of our very helpful guidance. Okay, while we wait to see, oh, let's see. Joe is indicating that she has gotten some questions in the chat. So Joe, if you would like to go ahead and ask that for our friends who were not able to use the audio feature, and Lee will get back. Oh, okay, we'll do Lee first. Lee, please go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Lee Alexander, TBL Fund, Denver, Colorado. My question is the financing of a solar system on an existing affordable housing property where some of the off-takers or customers will be serviced by the service system, in the sense that they will receive a reduction in their electricity, a 20% reduction. Is that project, the installation of the solar system, is that something that is eligible for participation?
Yeah, what you're describing, if it were part of a a larger rehabilitation of an existing property, and included in that, you were updating the HVAC, you're creating the solar, all of those things could be considered all part of the project. Remember, you do have a leverage requirement, and there's not a specific leverage requirement on every project, but you're better off to make sure that you are in the ballpark of what you're anticipating for your overall leverage. So you wouldn't want to do a one-off project, I guess is what I'm saying. And so if it's part of a bigger overall rehab of the project, I think that would probably be eligible. Less so if it's a one-off, but again, it depends.
But if I had a pipeline of projects like that, that pipeline would be eligible for participation.
Well, let me clarify. So, the Capital Magnet Fund program wouldn't be like a Department of Energy grant program where you're doing like, green rehab or reducing the utility costs, as Paul is indicating, preservation or rehabilitation where we're preserving the affordable unit itself. Right. And that's statutory. So it's sort of like a different program design. Like, I'm familiar with the programs you're talking about, Lee, but if it's not part of a, substantial rehabilitation or preservation of existing affordable housing, you will be challenged to meet the other statutory requirements, because the CMF program isn't like the, Department of Energy or the EPA programs that are designed around like green retrofitting. it's not a good fit for that use. And so I think that's probably our safest, that's the depends answer. If it's part of, a substantial rehabilitation where you're preserving, we're going to put 10-year. The other thing is, if you get an award and you use CMF dollars in there, there's a mandatory, 10-year affordability compliance period, right? Mm-hmm. So if the properties that you're talking about don't already have restrictive affordability covenants on them, you're going to have to put them on the property. So there's stickiness to the CMF money that's not like designed to sort of strategically, surgically go in and, hey, we're just going to add solar panels. Like, it's a great cause. Like, we all get it, but it's just not the best fit for the CMF program. Does that help answer the primary concern, which is like, if it's part of a major rehabilitation, the big one is going to be your leverage requirement, because
right.
So I think that those are some initial thoughts.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Good question.
Okay. Allison, please feel free to unmute and tell us where you're from and ask your question.
Thank you so much. My name is Allison McGovern. I'm with Dorchester Bay Economic Development Corporation up in Boston. So my organization is an affordable housing developer, but we provide other economic development services. So we were hoping to use, as stated in the NOFO, about 30% of this award for workforce development, or not workforce development, excuse me, economic development. So we were curious about the leverage requirement, if that means that 30% or whatever percent we put towards economic development of the leverage also needs to go towards those type of projects, or is it across the whole portfolio of both economic development and affordable housing projects?
Great question. It is across the whole portfolio. I am 99% sure. And yes, I see my teammates nodding in agreement here.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, that's a nice little feature of the program, that up to 30% can be used for economic development activities if they are in conjunction with the affordable housing and meet some of the other specifics. But we certainly have seen CMF awardees do some, great things in terms of providing childcare or other, economic development on site to programs. So that's always great when we have folks interested in that.
And if I could interject, the other exciting thing that comes up around this, because we look at issues, or not issues, but past awards, I'll just say, is that just because you're approved for EDA doesn't require you to do EDA. So you don't actually end up with a you need to spend 30% of your award. I just want to be really clear, because I think there's trepidation about if I put EDA in my application, how does that go to a performance goal? And if you look again at the assistance agreement, you will be approved. In other words, it will be an allowable use of your CMF award, but you don't actually get a mandatory, you have to create 30,000 square feet of economic development. There's no translation. It's just like an approval to be able to use some of your award. Again, it's based on your track record, and we're not just going to give you an award because you got a good idea, but it was substantiated. So I just want to be clear that, if you put it in your application, it's going to allow you the flexibility to do it, but you only really want to do it if you've got a pipeline and a track record of completing it successfully. That's a good one that comes up a lot. Yep.
All right. So I'm jumping in here because, reminder, we really prefer you to ask questions out loud, but if you're in a noisy environment, you can send them to Elizabeth, but a few people did send them to me. So I'm jumping in as their microphone right now. So one question from, I can't see her full name, sorry, from first name Aaron, is in Appendix 3A, the second line of the instructions indicates that we need to include at least 2 projects in our project pipeline. Our application only has 1 project. Is it mandatory to have 2 projects listed in this appendix?
Yeah, I can answer that. We want you to have at least 2. We are looking at your pipeline, so the more the better, because if one project doesn't happen, things happen, right, in real estate, you need a backup. And so it's really important from our point of view to have at least two. If you have more, that strengthens what we would view as a, very robust pipeline.
Just to piggyback on what Paula said, I think one of the interesting things about the CMF fund is that we don't actually fund specific projects, right? We fund your organization to do a certain number of units with a certain number of characteristics. But as Paula indicated, real estate is a volatile industry. So we want a pipeline of projects to indicate the types of things that you would be able to, but we are not actually specifically funding those projects. We're funding your organization.
And I just want to hop in too and say one caveat on that. If you are proposing home ownership, the way that you'll interact with Appendix 3A is you actually just enter one project because it's your home ownership project. We don't expect you to list one unit for all the houses that you might be providing a down payment assistance program to, because that would be very cumbersome. So you can just list that all under one project, but that's unique to home ownership. I assume Erin is probably talking about rental with her question. Back to you, Joe.
Thanks, team. I have a couple others, so I'm scrolling up. So the first one is, how do we put economic development community facilities in the track record chart? And I'm about to team share the instructions, but as a starting point for this one, but we can hop in. So the track record chart is table 1A. And for economic development activities, you enter the total number of facilities produced in each category. For example, one building with eligible economic development activities is 1 unit for economic development activities. 2 buildings with eligible economic development activities is 2 units of economic development activities, etc. So just a demo of how helpful our instructions can be for that question. There's more.
And back to
we have any hands raised?
Back to the earlier point too, Joe, when you put that in your application and you're given an award, you will be approved to do economic development activities. You won't be required, for example, to do 2 projects or 2, I guess we're calling them units, but you wouldn't be required to do 2 units. So
correct. Correct. And this was
again. Yep.
That bears mentioning that the question was specifically about the track record table, but it's essentially the same for how you would put it into table 2 or A2 when talking about projected economic development activity as well. Okay. Any hands raised, Elizabeth, or should I keep on keeping on?
Keep on.
Okay. Hold on one second. The next question is Appendix 3, early stage financing or loan loss reserve. Can you explain this? How to distinguish between early stage and permanent financing? Annie Riggle, you might have to unmute and ask your question because I don't know if we fully understand it. However, I can point you to the FAQs, 6.14 particularly, which provides very specific instructions on how to handle early stage or permanent financing, especially when the case is that the early stage financing will convert to permanent financing. It should then be listed as permanent and not early stage. Team, anyone else want to add to this question? And Wriggle, if you're on, you're welcome to unmute and clarify what you want to know.
Waiting to see if he does. I thought there was something in there about loan loss reserve, but
that's the one I don't understand.
Maybe we could get back.
If you were on, please submit a service request.
Yeah, that's the title of that first column in Appendix 3B. If we pull up the application instructions, it does say early stage financing or loan loss reserve / guarantee. So maybe that's a copy and paste from the instructions, but generally would just like highly encourage you to take a look at the instructions. They do, I think, specify, we hope clearly, you know, how you should interact with table 3B. If you just keep going, Joe, it'll be on 76 of the PDF. Yeah, so you can see these are the two different column names and then how you should interact with those depending on the type of leverage or financing source you have.
Okay, great. I see we have another question has come in. Mitch, if you'd like to unmute and tell us where you're from. Oh, I know where you're from. We see.
Hey, it's me.
Yes, please go ahead. Delighted to have another question from you, Mitch. Go ahead.
I appreciate it. So just on that same point we were just talking about, we have really like 3 stages of financing: pre-development, construction, and then permanent. We're interpreting early stage to just be pre-development, which is where we would be deploying the CMF funds. I thought that was clearer than trying to mingle that with construction. So it's really just like pre-development and then permanent is permanent and the construction financing isn't included. Am I interpreting that correctly, or does construction financing somehow need to be shown in the application?
Are you saying that your financing, does the pre-development stay in through construction? So it gets paid back by the construction loan? Then you do have to show the construction loan also as early stage. The permanent is what takes out everything else.
Okay, so any interim financing until the very permanent one should be under early stage, including construction financing.
Yeah, as long as it's not staying in as permanent. Sometimes, you know, you start and you let it stay in, that's allowed. But I think what you're describing is at each stage it gets repaid.
Correct, yeah.
The distinction is between interim and permanent financing. And so both of those uses would be interim financing. And then we're layering on top of that, like, you know, the fact that loan loss reserves or a loan guarantee, right, would function differently. But the distinction you're drawing, Mitch, and if I got you right, you're from Arlington Housing Partnership, if my notes were right. Oh, phew. But this is generally applicable. So yeah, the distinction you want to draw in your own mind is between interim and permanent financing.
Okay. And it's the Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing, in case you need to know the actual name.
I was like AHP. No, I knew I
APAH. We're a previous grantee. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you. We do encourage folks to go ahead if you have any other burning questions. We, the CMF team, are here for you. We'll let that have a couple minutes to see if folks think of anything. Joe, were there any other ones from the chat that you thought would be good for the group at large?
There's one. I'm not sure exactly what it's asking again, but can we include reimbursable costs? If so, how far back can we go?
We'll need more information to respond to that. So I guess, again, the answer depends. I assume it's talking about direct administrative expense as a reimbursable cost, but I'm not going to speculate. So if somebody who asked that question just can unmute and provide a little bit more context for what specific.
And Wriggle, if you want to unmute and ask follow-up question, please do.
And if you're not able to for some reason, perhaps you're having audio trouble, then go ahead and submit a service request.
Is that referring to soft costs?
So we don't know. I can't speculate, and that's why I don't want to posit an answer. I will say that the answer will be contained, cliffhanger, in the assistance agreement, and that's where, you know, our job is to help interpret some of the, you know, information and to give an opinion, you know, decision. And we're going to probably on this one rely on, once there's clarity, we would assist in the interpretation of the assistance agreement if there were any additional questions.
Speaking of the assistance agreement, I know Joe navigated us there earlier, but just a plug for almost all of our resources are on the Step 2 Apply page. We have a 5-step process we talk about in CMF. But the FY 2023 assistance agreement, which is what we're pointing to as a reference, is in Step 4, closing a disbursement. So if you are not able to find it, it is not in Step 2 because it's, you know, the FY 24 agreements will be coming out when the awards are actually made, but they are substantially similar from year to year. So Step 4, closing and disbursement, is where to go if you are curious in seeing the FY 2023 one that we've been referencing. Lisa, I invite you to go ahead and unmute and tell us where you're from.
All right, yeah, thank you. Lisa Hauser, I'm with Habitat for Humanity of Iowa. So our application is a homeownership application and it's focused around down payment assistance. My question is on Appendix 3B again. Now that everybody's been asking that, I've been looking at it and thought of a question. So my question is focused around the definition of secured sources. And so it says, you know, it says legal commitment or received. And if we have commitments for, our leverage is with first mortgages, is what we're looking at to provide us the leverage. And if we're providing the first mortgage, or if some of our other housing partners are providing the first mortgage and have said, yes, we're going to commit to providing that, but obviously we don't have those families yet selected, you know, down to the individual buyer, because this is over the next 5 years. Can we consider that source secured because we're making that commitment to provide those first mortgages, or does that have to go in the anticipated?
Yeah, Lisa, it sounds the way you're describing it that would be secured. So there should be some kind of legal document that says that you've done this, some board action. There has to be something of substance that says that there is a legal commitment here, and you can count on that. But yeah, it doesn't have to be the individual homeowner.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great question. Thank you. All right, we can give it a few more minutes here, but I think we are perhaps nearing the end of the trickle of questions. We are, of course, always so excited. My favorite part of the application season, or the program round, is when we get to read the applications, because it's so interesting to see everything that you all are doing out there in the field. So thank you so much for your work. Oh, Isabel, yes, please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, thanks. And I hesitated to ask because I'm not sure if this is considered specific to our application or not. But I'm looking at Appendix 7, Table D, and that is about historical finances. And I'm just wondering, are the line items in our audit don't line up exactly with the lines that the application is asking for? And so I'm wondering, in these total lines, are you expecting, let's just look at assets, for example, where we have cash restricted, unrestricted, other real estate. is that consolidated assets and then allowance for loan and lease losses. And we have others that don't really quite fit in there. So I'm wondering, do you expect that total assets line to equal the sum of each of the other lines? Or are you expecting that there might be some that don't quite fit and like those are the key lines that you're looking at? And then you also just want to know the total lines.
Yeah, if I'm understanding your question, so right, we don't contemplate all of the different audit presentations, right? That's going to be up to everyone's auditor. So we have selected the key variables that as a program team we're interested in assessing. And so if you find like the total should equal the total from your audit. And there will be components of what, you know, all your various asset types that will need to total, and we'll look at your audit. And there might be from your, you know, chart of accounts, a couple of line items that we don't contemplate in the application. We don't ask for in the application. So if we don't ask for it in the application, you want to tie it only to what we're asking for in the information. And 100%, yes, all of the total lines should absolutely match. It's just that we don't include all of the sub chart of accounts, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question.
All right. Terry, please unmute and tell us where you're from and ask your question.
Thank you. I'm Terry Nash Giovannucci with Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, and I'm working diligently on this application. And it occurred to me to ask you, is there any competitive advantage to the dollar amount of the request? Because we have scads of, it feels like, projects that we could use a CMF award to support, but obviously, you know, there's only so much that can go around, right? So we're going to be very specific about the developments that we're going to have in our CMF pipeline. But I just wanted to ask you if there's any advantage to asking for more or less of the funds that are available.
Okay. No, I can tell you there's no competitive advantage. We're looking for folks to put together proposals of, you know, what's realistic for them based on the size and scope of their organization. We do, you know, provide some parameters, statutory. We can't award more than 15% to any one group. And we publish in the NOFA that over the past several years, the top award we've been able to make is 12 million. So that gives you some parameters to consider when you're asking, but there's no advantage. We have small groups who come in for the minimum award is $500,000 with great proposals, and we are evaluating them with the same criteria as the larger groups. So thanks for the question.
That's very helpful. It just occurred to me as I was motoring on, should we be asking for more? So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, one piggyback, it goes to something we were sharing earlier, Terry, too, is to be realistic, right?
Yes,
so to be realistic in your application proposals, based on your track record and your pipeline, and, vet all of the performance goals. Like a state housing finance agency will have a different volume of activity, you know what I mean, than like an independent nonprofit who's, local community based. And so I just, for the benefit of the entire call, again, look back at what you've committed to in your applications, because it has the little stars right in our application instructions. When you end up, before you submit, just make sure you're going to be comfortable that if you were given your full award, that those are levels that you're comfortable being held to. And we will adjust, as past practice. If you aren't given your full award, we will prorate your unit production goals commensurate with the reduction in your award amount. So that's another thing to keep in mind of like hedging against the upper limit of your award. Don't if you can do $10 million worth of activity, that's great. But if I only give you $5 million of award money, I'm not going to hold you to $10 million of volume. So
gotcha.
There is a built-in correction in our process. Yep.
Thank you, Andrew.
Of course. Great question.
Khalid, would you like to go ahead, unmute, and ask your question?
Yes. So once again, sometimes we're asked to enter into joint ventures with groups, and would that be able to count towards our pipeline as well, where we'd be able to bring the CMF dollars into those partnerships.
So you are a developer, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. The ownership of the project is probably a limited partnership or something of that nature, or a JV. So yes, you'd be able to contribute to that. There's a risk sharing kind of activity that we allow. It might fall under that category. I think kind of take a look at it. It's not a very typical thing that we see. And remember, you are responsible. So if you enter into a joint venture, you have to make sure that this is someone you can count on. This is something that's going to get done. If it were me, I'd want to make sure I have a certain amount of control over the project before I did that, because you will be held accountable for your performance for CMF.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Yeah, not only that, I would also say, you know, your partner would have to be comfortable with the terms and conditions that CMF is going to require on certain projects. So like, if they're not copacetic with a 10-year affordability period, like, you know, there are other program requirements that come with the CMF money. And then I think the, you know, obviously your partners would have to be comfortable with that because it's going to be a requirement. And then the second thing to probably mention, Khalid, I didn't hear it in your question, but as Paul has shared, we also have a lot of recipients that are co-recipients that invest in the same project. And it didn't sound like from your example, Khalid, that you're contemplating that it would be another CMF award recipient. But for the sake of clarity, I want to just confirm that we do have mechanisms that allow recipients to co-fund the same projects that they might, you know, providing different parts of the capital, you know, financing to the project. And there are rules around that, obviously, to prevent, you know, to make sure that we're not double counting. And, you know, we have to prorate the units, like based on how much of the share of the deal that you each have. So Khalid, if you have questions about like, if it's a co-funding, the joint venture is with another CMF recipient, we've got a lot more information on that, but I just wanted to tease those two additional points out for you as things to keep in mind.
Yeah, I did look at that, but I don't think that we will be pursuing that route just based on time and other things. But one additional question regarding affordability requirements. I know that there's opportunity for some of the units to be, well, mixed income and almost market rate in some communities. When you say 80% AMI, that can mean different things in different circles. Is that inclusive of, is that just for rent? 30% of that 80% AMI person income is dedicated to rent? Is that how you, is that the standard you're using?
No, it's 30% of the area median income as defined by HUD. So if it's 80%, you know, it'd be 80,000 if the area median income were 100,000. There are adjustments for family size, etc. So again, look closely at the assistance agreement, at the FAQs and things of that sort.
Yes, and well, I guess what I was saying, that sometimes they take utilities out of that number and reduces the effective rent.
Well, the rent is calculated similarly based on area median income, and then there is a utility allowance requirement, and that's in the interim rule, and it's also in the assistance agreement and in the FAQs.
And just to underscore what Paul is saying too, you know, we're using HUD as like the national data source, so that like each, you know, this question comes in occasionally, like, oh, we calculate it differently, or, you know, my state wants it calculated differently. No, so we're running like at a national level, and that's why this database that is available in our guidance and in the assistance agreement is sort of like you know, and then it's resets like on the periodic basis. And so it will increase over time, like, you know, you get an award in 2024 and you're qualifying, you know, for eligibility in 2026, you know, the data gets updated. So I just want to be crystal clear on why we're pointing to one single source as the authoritative statement on this. It's because it's a, you know, it's a national program, and this ensures consistency across all jurisdictions.
Yeah, and I think I'm understanding your question a little bit more, Khalid, that you were asking about rents and how they're calculated. I thought you were asking about family income. And
yes.
Yeah, the rents are similar. It's a similar calculation by using LIHTC. Very generally, it's the area median income, and it's adjusted for family size by the number of bedrooms, and it's 30% of that divided by 12 that you rent. So that's very generally the way to look at it, but it's very similar to the way it's done for LIHTC.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Does anyone have any final questions they would like to ask? Something that's come to mind? Follow up from someone else? Okay. Seeing none, I will turn it over to Andrew for us to close out our session today. Andrew?
Fantastic. Thanks, Elizabeth. Bravo, team. What great information. And thank you all for participating too and your interest in the Capital Magnet Fund program. As Elizabeth shared, you know, we're thrilled at this time of year because we get to, you know, touch base with everyone and see all the cool stuff that you're out and doing and proposing to do. So just on behalf of the Capital Magnet Fund team, Joe Joy, Sarah Ferraro, Elizabeth Huffman, Paula Sampson, Jordan Lloyd. I saw Carrie Decker and Bradley Streeter also on here. It's just really, you know, just a thrill to be part of this program. It's a very unique type of funding when you think about federal funding that's available for affordable housing and how it's being used. It's very flexible. So it's a clutch program that we understand has a potential for a lot of impact in supporting all the great work that you guys do every day. So keep on asking your questions. We want to wish you the best of luck in applying to the Capital Magnet Fund program. And just a reminder, Joe can bring up the schedule once again really quick, that the application is due on April 16th, which is going to be, I think that's a Tuesday? No, Wednesday. Tuesday. The Tuesday. And so we're not going to be able to respond to any program related questions after the Friday, after, you know, April 12th. So please don't ask any questions after April 12th because we're precluded from being able to respond to them. This just ensures that we are able to answer everyone's questions that do come in. So please keep that deadline in mind. If you run into an AMIS issue, the AMIS help desk, you know, like, hey, my account isn't working. I'm an authorized representative. I can't sign my application, like technical issues like that. As Joe's got the schedule up, we will be able to answer those on the day of the application. But, you know, be advised that the AMIS help desk, they're a contractor and they're only available until 5 in the afternoon. So please don't wait until the last minute to sort of come across an AMIS, you know, glitch, because like, hey, I wasn't able to sign my application is not a, you know, an error that we're going to be able to allow an exception to missing the application deadline. And basically nobody's around at 11:58, you know, the night the application is due to actually, you know, help you resolve those types of issues. So just a plug, set, you know, an internal, you know, deadline that's earlier than the 16th, and you'll be in safe harbor. But I think it's worth mentioning. But again, we're thrilled that there was so much interest. We hope we answered all your questions. And if anything else comes up, please let us know by submitting a service request. So again, best of luck. We hope everyone has a great afternoon. Take care.